Wouldn't it be great if you could take cuttings from grocery store herbs and grow them on into full plants? Well, you can. Hi, I'm Ben, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can enjoy a never-ending supply of herbs from a single purchase. Herbs are very easy to propagate, which means you only need to buy them once for a lifetime supply. It's an easy technique if you know how to do it correctly, and is especially suited to herbs because you almost always want the younger, fresher growth with the best flavour for cooking. To do this, we're going to propagate herbs from cuttings, including basil, mint, rosemary and thyme. We'll be taking cuttings from herbs bought very cheaply from the grocery store, then rooting them in both water and potting mix. And here they are. When selecting plants or packets of herbs for this purpose, you want to look for the very healthiest growth. Let's open this mint up as an example. Look, you can see straight away this is really healthy. It's firm, it's green, it's lush. What you want to avoid are herbs that are starting to blacken around the edges or that are wilting, but these are just the ticket for what we're after. And if you're taking cuttings from garden plants, make sure to take your cuttings from material that's free of any pests and diseases, and check the undersides of the leaves too. Also avoid material that's starting to flower because you want the cuttings to concentrate on root formation. Okay, so let's take our cuttings. It's best to take cuttings in batches so that they don't dry out. And if you're taking cuttings from established plants, then it's best to do it in the morning because the growth will still be full and firm and won't have started getting a bit limp in the heat of the day. Now, we're taking cuttings mainly from store-bought herbs, but this rosemary here is a dear old friend and it's on the way out, so I'm going to take some cuttings of it so I can replace it. Like I said, we're taking cuttings of non-flowering growth that's really healthy and looking in good shape, and this is all right here. It's not a huge amount to choose from, but there is enough to fill at least one pot with cuttings. Once you've taken your cuttings, and if you're not going to process them straight away, pop them into a bag that's got a bit of dampened kitchen towel in it, and that'll keep them nice and fresh so they don't deteriorate before you process them. Great, so we're now ready to process our cuttings, but first let me give you a quick rundown of what I'll be using to do that. I've got a sharp knife, but you could also use some kitchen scissors or some pruners or secateurs. The important thing though is to make sure that whatever you use has a sharp edge to it because you want a nice clean cut. I've also got some isopropanol or rubbing alcohol, which I'll wipe the cutting blades clean with to make sure they're nice and sterile. I've got jars here to pop the cuttings that we'll be growing in water into, and some water of course. And I've got a free draining potting mix and some 7cm or 3-inch pots. You could use plug trays as well, of course. And I've got my cuttings, so let's get cracking. Right, first things first, after sterilising our cutting blade, is that we want to make sure that our cuttings are the right height, and that's about 4 to 6 inches or 10 to 15 centimetres. We make a cut just below the node, that's where the leaves join the stem, and the reason we do this is because that's where most of the growth hormones are concentrated, so it makes sense to cut it there. You want to make these cuts as soon as possible to actually getting them on and rooting them. And the reason for that is they quickly start to heal over, and you don't want them to do that because that'll inhibit the root growth. Once you've trimmed them to the right height, you need to remove some of the leaves to slow evaporation from the cutting. This will stop it going weak and allow it to concentrate on those roots. Generally, you want to leave about the top 2 pairs of leaves, so something like that is ideal. I'll get on and prepare a few more cuttings so we've got a good selection and you can see kind of what we're after. And here you have the selection of herbs all nicely trimmed. Now they're not all exactly the same size, but the important thing, they're properly trimmed at the node and the lower leaves are removed so they shouldn't wilt. I'm going to fill the jar with water and just simply pop them in. And you want the cuttings in the water so that the leaves remain just above the water level. Don't of course waste all the trimmings, you can use those in your cooking. Mint and basil are among the very quickest herbs to root, and you may see roots within just 1 week. They're also the best rooted in just simple old mains water. I'm going to go ahead and prepare these basil cuttings very promptly because it's getting quite warm now, and do it in exactly the same way. Trimming just below a node, nipping off the lowest leaves to leave just the top pair or so. I'll take, it's about right like that, and preparing them all and then popping them straight into water as soon as you can. Now, woodier stems such as rosemary and thyme are prepared in exactly the same way. You make a cut, fresh cut, just below a leaf node, but then rather than cutting each of the individual leaves off, you can simply strip them off like that. Nice and simple. And each of those little wounds where a leaf has been removed, that's got all those growth hormones, so that's going to encourage even more roots. Really very straightforward. Now they're all prepared, it's time to pot them into our mix here. Now they will actually root perfectly well in water, and thyme does this particularly well, but by popping them into potting mix you can kind of put them aside and you don't have to top up the water so often and water them, so it's a bit of a more of a sort of hands-off approach. For the potting mix I've added a little bit of perlite, you could use sand, and this opens it out a bit and helps it to drain. To pop them in, simply make a little hole with a narrow stick or something like a chopstick and pop them in. It really is as simple as that. Some of these more rigid ones, like the rosemary here, you can probably just poke straight in without having to make a hole, but we'll certainly have to do that with the thyme. You can dip the cuttings into hormone rooting powder to encourage roots, but it's not really necessary, and I find I get perfectly good success without that. Something else you could use actually that a lot of people swear by is honey, and honey has a sterilising effect which will obviously help with root formation because you're getting rid of any competition from bugs and nasties. Pop the cuttings to the edge of the pot and pre-wet the potting mix as well. That way it's nice and firm and you shouldn't have to water again. Keep cuttings in a bright position but out of harsh direct sunlight. They will root quicker in the warmth, so you may get the speediest results on an indoor windowsill. Check water levels regularly and top up water as required so the bare stems are constantly submerged. The water will get cloudy with time, so change the water every week or so to keep it fresh and clear. Potting mix should be kept damp but not excessively wet. There's a good chance you may not even have to water at all until the cuttings have rooted. Now your cuttings could root as quickly as 1 week, but these ones here are 2 weeks old, and some of them have already got quite a good little root system going, especially the mint. I'll get them out so you can see. There you go, look at these mints. They're definitely ready to pot up. The basil's lagging a little bit further behind, but there are some little roots here. So I might leave those in the water for another week or so just to let them grow on so they're as successful as the mint there. I also tried rooting some thyme in water and it's done really well. You can see here it's got some really lovely fibrous roots, and some of these are ready to pot up as well. You can't obviously see the roots from cuttings that are in potting mix, but one way you can tell something positive is going on is if there's any new growth. These were only taken 2 weeks ago, so I'm pretty sure there isn't much root growth yet, but they're still looking really healthy and they're not wilting, so I'm confident that they are actually going to successfully root. So I'll leave those be, and once they're ready, I'll just carefully tease them apart and pop them into their own pots. Now these guys are ready to pot on, so I'm just using 3-inch or 7cm pots again, filling it with my potting mix, which again has a little perlite added for drainage. Then it's a question of simply making a hole and popping or cutting in. I can use my finger for a nice sturdy cutting like this mint here. In it goes, and just firm it back in and give it a tap to settle the potting mix around the roots, and give that a good water and we'll be good to go. And there we are. These ones to your right are going back indoors to carry on rooting, and these are the ones we've just potted up. These are going to go out of the direct sun. We'll acclimatise them to full sun gradually over a few days so they don't suddenly wilt in the heat. If you're in a hot climate, you might like to consider shading the pots themselves so you don't scorch the roots, at least for a week or two until they get a little bit more established. Once they've grown on a bit, you'll want to pinch out the top of each of these little herbs here so that they bush out. And of course, you can use the material that you've pinched out to propagate even more herbs. And so the cycle continues. I hope you're encouraged to grow herbs from cuttings. It's easy to do, a lot of fun, and a great way to grow a truly endless supply. What are your favourite herbs to grow? Join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a big green thumbs up, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming videos. I'll catch you next time.